Welcome to the Certificate in Social Justice Leadership Information Session. My name is Jasmine Walia, and I serve as the Program Coordinator for the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us to learn about our continuing education programs, including our new Certificate in Social Justice Leadership. We're very excited to have several of our subject matter experts, or SMEs, as we like to refer to them, here today to share their personal experiences as well as motivations for teaching a social justice leadership course. And I do just have a bit of housekeeping I'd like to go over before we get started. So closed captioning is available for this webinar, and you can access them by clicking on the live transcript button at the bottom bar of your Zoom screen if they're not popping up automatically. In addition, the session is being recorded, and we will be posting it on our Certificate in Social Justice Leadership webpage, as well as sending it out in a follow-up email to everyone who registered for the event. And finally, we'll have a Q&A portion at the end of the event to answer all of your questions about this new program. So feel free to share any questions you have in the chat. And if you haven't done so already, feel free to share your name and organization with us in the chat as well, so we can get a feel for everybody in the room. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Dr. Kenny Taylor, the Center's Director of Outreach and Professional Development. And I will go ahead and share the screen with you all.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. And again, welcome to you all. And we really appreciate you joining us today. Really excited to launch our new Certificate in Social Justice Leadership program. Here at the Bush School, one reason for the excitement really has to do with making sure, or to the extent that we can, rise up to serving our mission in the best way possible. And we believe that the launch of our Certificate in Social Justice Leadership is certainly an extension of that. At the Bush School, which I joined in 2017 as assistant professor of the practice, meaning that I served out in the field as a nonprofit professional for more than 20 years before joining the Bush School. And one of the questions that I always had on my mind as someone who served in the field was, there were so few people that looked like me, and were we doing justice to those that we were actually serving? And in my case, just for example, the 12 years that I spent with Big Brothers Big Sisters as a part-time social worker at the time when I first started with them, is that many of the kids that we were serving were Blacks, Hispanics, and Latinas. And I often wondered, as a really early professional in the nonprofit field, again, what kind of service was that when I happened to be the only Black male at the agency at the time, while more than 50% of the children that we were serving, again, were Black and Hispanics. So that question had been on my mind for a while, without any knowledge at the time that I would ever transition into the academic space. And what I learned over the years is that that was the makeup of many of the nonprofit organizations that I came across. And then from a research standpoint, understanding that that was the same case kind of across the board, if you will. So that said, the program is really set up to answer the question of how we can best serve, or what can we do as an higher education institution to support higher racial equity at nonprofit organizations. And some of you all are probably familiar with that the research at this point has been consistent for more, or nearly 30 years anyways, that approximately 84% and up of all CEO and executive director positions, of all board positions, and all board chair positions primarily are occupied by those that are white or Caucasian. And so over the years, with that in mind, there's been
Did Kenny freeze, Jasmine?
I don't know. It looks like he may have cut out. Um, let's give him just a second. Kenny, you were leaving us hanging.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm not exactly sure where I left off, but I'll just keep going if you all can hear me now. That there's been a lot of talk about what we can do in the nonprofit sector to make organizations more equitable from a racial standpoint, especially in leadership positions. And again, with being unsure exactly where I left off, but just to comment on the fact that we know that whites occupy 84% of all board chair positions, board positions, and also executive director positions or CEO positions at nonprofit organizations. Research basically indicates that though nonprofit organizations don't look well at that and they want to do something to change that, what hasn't happened is action. And so what we're hoping to do with this program is really attract professionals that are interested in playing in that space, if you will. So our hope is to identify and then also educate nonprofit professionals who are highly interested in looking at systems and structures at nonprofit organizations to change the direction and accelerate racial equity at nonprofit organizations. So at the core of this program is really identifying folks who want to go and make change. And when we look at potentially what are some of those changes that can be made at organizations, we want those that are interested in this program that are willing to investigate what those policies and procedures are. What does career development look like? Supporting the case for why racial equity at nonprofit organizations is important. And for me, though, there's development standpoint to ensure that more people of color are ready for and in position to take on some of these roles, especially as we have leadership shifts at nonprofit organizations. One thing that I do want to mention is that the Bush School has a long history of public service and, of course, investigating what's going on in nonprofit organizations from an equity standpoint. So as I looked at some of the research that has been conducted at the Bush School over the years, that really led me to this point and our team to this point to launch a program in social justice leadership is we've had faculty members at the school investigate inclusive board practices at nonprofit organizations. We've had folks that have done salary equity studies in public spaces. And a couple of years ago, the Bush School invested in me to explore and research how people of color narrate their experiences on boards, which again has really led to this day where we said, we don't want to talk about this anymore. We want to do something about advancing equity at nonprofit organizations. And so if you're joining us here today, again, we thank you so much. And we say that we hope that you are interested in doing just that. And we're prepared on our end to help coach you along the way, support you along the way, and actually be a player in the space of taking action versus these DEI experiences that we know are going on at nonprofit organizations that have raised awareness, but not necessarily looks like I'm having a little difficulty, so I'll stop here soon. But just to open up and let our other subject matter experts introduce themselves, I'll tell you a little bit about the first class that opens up the certificate, and that is our Social Justice Leadership at nonprofit organizations. Based on the introduction that you just heard, this first class will help you all explore, and we'll explore together these structural inequities that have led to so few people of color in leadership roles. And as we mentioned, and we hope that you know about us, that we're a school that supports those that are going out into the field to practice. So all of our graduates, to the tune of 80–85%, are going out and actually working in the space. So the certificate and all of the classes are definitely designed for practitioners. And what we'll focus on is helping you to identify and take inventory of those things that are at your organizations or the organizations that you volunteer at, and identify what those structural pieces might be at your organizations. And then after you've taken inventory of those things at your organizations, to actually have conversations with your leaders as to, this is what I found as a participant of the courses that I'm taking on social justice, and to encourage conversation between you and those that you report to. If you happen to be an executive director at an organization, we would challenge you to then take that conversation to your board. If you're a director level position, regardless of position level, for any of you all that are here with us today, it's taking the conversation to the person that you report to. We'll have different scenarios depending on what your actual role is at your organization. And once you share that information with someone, the person that you report to, then it's, what we found is that organizations just aren't having conversations about this stuff. But we'll provide you with the tool to be able to take inventory of what's going on at your organization, sharing that conversation. And then as a wrap up to the first course is to utilize that information to start the beginning of a social justice action plan at your organization. I'll save the rest of my comments since my internet connection is a little wonky for later, and I'll turn my video off for now, but then hand it over to our next subject matter expert.
Great, thank you, Dr. Taylor. And next up, can everyone see my screen? I just want to confirm if I could get a nod or a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Mason Alexander Hawk. Mason, if you want to just share a bit about yourself and about your course as Dr. Taylor did, that would be great. I will go ahead and mute myself.
Hi, so sorry, my Zoom keeps, I don't know if everyone else's keeps like closing out and coming back, but hopefully you weren't waiting for too long. My name is Mason. I am going into my second year as a PhD student here at Texas A&M. I am in the College of Architecture, Landscape Architecture and Urban Planning. I graduated from the Bush School last May, so it's good to see all these familiar and friendly faces. I will be teaching one of the courses in this program, and my course is, or a little background, I guess, about myself. I started doing DEI work in the workplace right out of undergrad. I started corporate and led a lot of DEI initiatives. I then went to the Bush School, where I was part of their DEI committee, as well as worked in a government space with a regional government agency in Portland, where I worked with the communications department and the DEI department to create a style guide for the language that they used throughout their entire agency regionally, and the words and the impact of language and the words that they use on any external facing documents. I'm really passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, and the importance of not only creating a space for people, but also making sure that everyone feels that they can thrive and be successful in that space. So this course is really focused on the intersection between diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the importance of all three, and the difference in all three of those elements within the workspace. It really starts more interpersonal with understanding unconscious biases and stereotypes. And then as the course proceeds, it gets more practical in terms of how you can move from cultural competency to cultural humility. So taking that step further past cultural competency, and really implementing a couple different models that will be introduced in the course, including the Milton J. Bennett's development model of intercultural sensitivity and an interdisciplinary leadership model. So regardless of what your role is within your organization or where you volunteer, hopefully the information provided will be helpful to help implement some of these strategies in terms of DEI within your organizations. And the lectures incorporate a lot of different readings and videos. And so hopefully it's really interactive and we can learn from each other. And I'm excited. And thank you.
Thank you, Mason. Awesome. Okay, we will keep moving through. And as a reminder, if you have any questions about these courses, anything that you're hearing from our SMEs, feel free to add that into the chat. And so we will move on to Dr. Duchess Humphrey, and she will be telling us about herself and her course, Introduction to Cultural Competency and Nonprofit Management.
Hello, hello, hello. So I am a recent graduate from the University of North Texas, where I achieved and also received my doctorate in public administration with a focus in nonprofit management. Prior to my doctoral studies, I served on boards of various nonprofits within my community and also in various committees or on various committees. My experience there was similar to Dr. Taylor's, where I was the only one or the only person of color on these committees and on these particular boards. And I felt like I was window dressing. Upon my completion of my doctoral studies, I found a deep interest in the area of cultural competence, not only because of my previous experience in the practice of serving on these boards, but also within academia, where I felt that I was one of the only persons that had this understanding that there needed to be this idea of cultural competence. In this course that I will be teaching, I start with cultural competence before we get to these terms such as equity and social justice, some of the other terms that we use, multiculturalism. What I believe is that cultural competence is a requisite before we understand these particular issues and these behaviors. Why should leaders regard cultural competent leadership? That's one of the primary questions that we'll be discussing and also unpacking. My answer, or not really an answer, but my suggestion is that good nonprofit leadership balances, negotiates, and also facilitates this relationship within and outside of the organizational milieu. What we are seeing now in our, I guess around the world, is that there's this call for organizations to be more mindful of various cultures. My suggestion is that we become more culturally competent. And to me, again, that's that starting point.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Humphrey. We're so glad to have you as a part of this program and our other initiatives. Dr. Humphrey is actually also teaching one of the certificate in nonprofit leadership courses, which is the other ongoing continuing education effort that we create and actually have already provided 2 offerings of that. But I will get to that at the end of this presentation, since we're hearing from our awesome SMEs right now. And I'm actually now going to pass it off to Dr. Frank Ashley. He can share a bit about all of his accolades and accomplishments, as well as his involvement with our certificate.
Howdy, I guess I'm the old man of the group right here. I've been in the A&M system a little over 30 years. I'm in my 10th position, believe it or not, in the A&M system, serving as a faculty member, a dean, director of admissions at A&M for a while. And my last position with the system before coming to the Bush School was vice chancellor for recruitment and diversity for the A&M system. Served on several nonprofit boards, currently serving on a few right now. But here at the Bush School, I teach a course called Managing Workplace Diversity in public and nonprofit organizations. And pretty much in this course, which is the exact same class right here, we look at, first of all, what is diversity? We try to come up with common definitions of diversity, stereotypes, implicit bias, discrimination. So we're all on the same level when we start talking about some of these issues. Then next we go into why management diversity. Why is it important? Why do we need to manage diversity? And here we look at the benefits of diversity in an organization. The fourth step is pretty much how leadership affects diversity. You know, why is it important to have effective leaders, or as I call them, ethical leaders, to really truly manage diversity? We also dive into this idea of implicit biases. And then lastly, what we do is we have discussions on all the different areas of diversity: racial, cultural diversity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, disabilities, able bodies, and also immigration status. We jump into pretty much deep discussions in all those areas right there.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Ashley. Great. Next, we are actually going to go back to Dr. Taylor, who's going to be presenting about Terry Broussard-Williams' course. She is traveling right now and couldn't make it, but Dr. Taylor will provide a little bit about her as an SME for us, and then talk a bit about her course that actually will be wrapping up the 5-course certificate program.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jasmine. Really appreciate you. You have the description of Terry Broussard-Williams' course there in front of you. And first, before getting into details of the course, just really happy to have her. I've had the opportunity to work with Terry in the past, but her course will examine how to identify a public policy issue and begin an issues-based advocacy campaign to create a social justice movement. My personal work with Terry was when she was with the American Heart Association, and just did a lot of wonderful things there, and know that she's highly respected from her career there and the stuff that she's doing now. But she has more than a 20-year career as a government relations executive that afforded her the opportunity to create community shifting outcomes. I had the opportunity to work with her on a couple of smoke-free campaigns. And over in Austin, which is where she resides, she's one of Austin Business Journal's most influential women in Central Texas, and is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Masters in Nonprofit Leadership program. But again, her course will get into examining how to identify a public policy issue and how to begin an issue-based advocacy campaign to create that social justice movement. The exciting part about her course, if you think through what was presented to you today, where we open up just with an introduction of how are we thinking at the Bush School about social justice? What does it actually mean? Taking inventory at your organizations, and then actually having conversations with leadership at your organizations, all the way down to when we get to the social justice policy and partnerships for social change, where you would then at the end create a plan to teach yourselves and those others that you work with how to create this type of movement at your organizations. And this could be whether you are interested in creating a movement personally, if you're thinking about starting an organization, or within your own organization. So to have an action plan, something to leave with, to actually get started, kind of going back to the point about there has been raised awareness when we talk diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice. But what hasn't happened is any real change if we go back to just what data tells us. And it just tells us basically that the same has existed for more than 30 years. What's interesting to me is there's a lot of generational shifts going on in nonprofit organizations. So as people continue to retire, as more people of color want and desire to come into the nonprofit sector, that shift there is going to be amazing. And what we've been seeing already is if people of color can't find their place, if these inequities still exist, what we're seeing is more of them are deciding to develop their own organizations. But we know that our traditional nonprofit organizations are preparing for these shifts. So what can we do to actually help accelerate the change? And we believe that through our social justice leadership program, that we can play in that space and eventually have some outcomes that would represent these shifts well. I'll stop there and maybe we can go into a question and answer session to see what questions you might have for any of us that discuss the programs or courses that are part of the social justice leadership certificate. And I'd certainly be interested in knowing and understanding how you learned about us and why you're considering maybe joining us.
Feel free to jump in. And if there aren't any questions at the moment, we can actually, we'll backtrack a little bit and we can talk a bit about logistics as well, but I'll pause for just a moment before doing that to see if anyone wants to ask a question or make a comment. Okay, well, I'll just provide some more information in the meantime and maybe questions will come up. I did just want to share a bit about the overview of the program, as well as kind of what the structure looks like and how it looks and feels to move through this from a participant perspective. Now that we've heard from our subject matter experts about a lot of the planning and theory and experiences that have shaped this program. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this is our second continuing education program out of the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy. Our first is our certificate in nonprofit leadership. And that program actually launched in August of 2020. We just wrapped up our second program in May. And that program is more of a generalist experience for nonprofit leaders, covering topics from board governance to leadership to performance management. And that is a 15-week program that earns 10 continuing education units. And we've received really positive feedback as far as the experience of participants and going and taking some of those learnings back into their organizations. So this new certificate, the Certificate in Social Justice Leadership, will be launching this fall, of course. Each of the slides that featured our subject matter experts, as well as their course descriptions, included the specific course dates. But the entire program will run from August 11th through December 21st. It is a great 4.5 months of content, and those dates also do apply for the certificate in nonprofit leadership. And then I just listed here, we're really excited in the spring to be launching a certificate in fundraising leadership. So hopefully you can see that we're trying to achieve a well-rounded slate of courses and programs to apply to nonprofit practitioners at various levels and various organizations. So the online format of this program is asynchronous and allows participants to move through each weekly module at a pace that works for them. Evenings, weekends, we know tend to work for folks that are working full-time jobs. So we want to accommodate that in these courses. And so that's how they're structured. But a really special feature of these courses is that on Monday evenings, we hold live Zoom information sessions or office hours where participants can come. These are all optional, and they can discuss the previous week's coursework, themes, takeaways, ask questions with the subject matter expert teaching and leading that course. We have gained the most positive feedback, I think, in this area of the courses because there's so much peer-to-peer sharing and learning that occurs here. And it really develops the cohort look and feel as we've offered this now a couple of times. And we're very excited about this model with the certificate in social justice leadership because it will allow the space and time for the folks in this program to really talk through some of these theories, think about the application piece with those that are walking through this course with them before taking it back to their organizations and workplaces. And registration is very easy. It's online. There's no like formal application. It's really just something you can go in and sign up for. And the cost is $1,499 for the entire certificate program. The individual courses are $349 a piece. And we do offer a discount if you have 3 or more folks from your organization joining us. So any questions about that, we can answer those as well. But that was kind of a lot on the logistics. So I will again pause and make some time for questions that you may have.
Yeah, it looks like there was one question. If you would go ahead and jump in, and then everyone can hear, and we'll go from there. There
Did you
go.
want me to ask the question?
Please, so we can discuss it out loud.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And I'm sorry, I have a hard stop, so I apologize. But I was curious, is the expectation that we, as the students, have to actually engage with our executive leadership? Because I kind of have a unique, relationship with the executive leadership, which is there really isn't a lot of there just isn't a lot of engagement. My program is a small program that I have basically, it's under the umbrella of this organization, but there's not a lot of, I don't have a lot of engagement, just period, with them. So I'm just curious if the coursework, everything is kind of, driven by these conversations with them. And many of them are not even in the same city, and just they're not engaging, not necessarily with me.
Sure.
Program. So.
Yeah, I think we understand that there'll be certainly others just like you that are in a similar situation. One of the things that we absolutely want to encourage is that dialogue, because we know that that's something that is missing when we start talking about races. Those conversations just aren't happening, or equity issues with nonprofit organizations just aren't happening. Our guess is that this information will prepare you one way or the other when that time comes. Or let's say you shift organizations. Let's say you volunteer elsewhere as a board member or looking to contribute to community spaces. We still feel like this information will be extremely helpful as you tackle those issues, if not in your own organization, other places that would benefit from it. since I know we have some friends here, I certainly I'm not above calling on folks, but I see Dorothy. Dorothy, would you mind commenting on why you're joining us today and what are you thinking about at your organization as the CEO of a local nonprofit here in the Brazos Valley?
Well, sure, Kenny. I'm the CEO of Twin City Mission here in Bryan College Station area. And our organization has really been taking critical looks at being a diverse organization, being known as an anti-racist organization out in the community, giving our employees a foundation of information and materials, and developing within our leadership a culture that tells them that we are an anti-racist organization. Now for us, Kenny, we have
Still there?
now on our board leadership, we are much more diverse. Our board president is Black, and we have several minorities on our administrative council. So our board is actually further along than our leadership team here at our agency. So with that team, I want to know what I can do as the CEO to be more diverse, to show that we are engaged, even though currently our team doesn't reflect that. So that's what my interest is. And I also have Jennifer. She's on here with us. She's one of our directors. She is the director of our homeless and housing services. And actually, she is leading our diversity and anti-racist team here at Twin City Mission. So she has an interest in this topic just as I do, and pushing forward our organization in the community.
Thank you, Dorothy. That's great to hear, and what we know of you as a local leader in our community. So we appreciate you. Looks like Christina has a question. You want to go ahead and maybe speak that out loud for us?
If not, I'm happy to read the question aloud. I know some folks don't love to speak on Zoom. Okay, sure, Christina, I can read that one for you. So Christina says, the development director at our organization let us know about this program. Our organization is small, so we do all work outside of our titles. I am co-chairing our strategic planning organization committee and have recently helped create a pay equity committee. Our next goal is to create a committee around racial equity. What ways can this program assist with our goals? Our board is not totally aligned with our value and vision. Thanks, Christina. That's a great question.
I'm happy to jump in, but any of our other SMEs can feel free as well. I think I'll start out with in creating a committee around racial equity. I would say that even in the opening of the course is to defining exactly what racial equity means at our organizations and what we or what you can take inventory of So in the first course, we're working on an assessment tool, and that assessment tool can help drive that process, we believe, at most any nonprofit organization. So some of that has to do, of course, with identifying demographics of what your organization simply looks like, and then a checklist from that point as to what barriers, I call them fairness barriers, you have at your organizations that either are or aren't noted within things like your policies and procedures. The other piece of that tool will get into what your onboarding looks like from a human resource standpoint, so that it provides you with a picture, if you will, of what your organization looks like when we talk about racial equity and social justice. What leadership positions do you have, and identifying specifically those where you have no persons of color? Have you developed a plan of action to get that to align a bit better with what your demographics say about your particular community? So I think from a racial equity standpoint, the program tends to focus, we definitely open up with defining what that looks like, providing you with a tool to conduct an assessment at your organization, and then challenging, kind of back to the comment from a little ago, challenging. So you mentioned that the board is not necessarily aligned with that, but finding ways, identifying ways to have that conversation at a board level. So the program is really kind of focused on the leadership, because to your point, if we can't get our boards to come on board, if you will, with this information, then we know that we already have a rough patch where things will probably not change. So to introduce those conversations and to find ways to put in performance metrics, provide boards with a way that they can wrap their arms around. One of the ways that I tend to think about it is, boards are responsible for strategic direction of the organization, for fundraising at the organization, for overall governance at the organization. Why not more diversity and equity at your organizations? There's these things that boards are used to and not used to, and our job is to get them being more used to having these conversations. So I hope that helps some, but if anyone else wants to jump in, please feel free.
Kenny, I was just going to make a statement. It's been my experience that, I mean, when you talk about issues like this, a lot of people go, "Oh my God, not another diversity training session I got to go to." But it's been my experience, though, that once someone goes through something like this, I can just tell you, Kenny, the session that we had 2 weeks ago with your group, I've had 5 people contact me already and ask me if I could come to their organizations and talk to them about it. Because it's one of these things, I mean, one of the things that I go over is this idea of implicit biases that, I mean, we all have biases. I mean, I teach diversity and I have biases. So, and it's human, but to help people understand that, to help people look at themselves and really understand, I mean, the benefits of having a diverse group with diverse ideas. In your group, I use the example of having the person in a wheelchair in my class. And, here I am, I know a lot about diversity, but it wasn't until the situation where it was 7:00 at night, the guy couldn't get out of the building because the doors weren't accessible. I'd been here 3 years and I never thought about whether or not our building was accessible. But it took someone being in my class for me to realize that. That's what diversity does. Just getting the diverse ideas from different people. And it's not this idea, I'm going to beat you over the head with diversity training. But people have to understand these are the benefits. I mean, first of all, I mean, Jasmine, you had my class. If I asked you why diversity is important, they'd probably say because it's the right thing to do. Yes, it is the right thing to do, but everyone needs to feel like they're part of the organization. And just having those diverse ideas, I mean, it just brings such richness to all of our conversations.
Thank you. Great. Let's see who else. Ella, any maybe want to comment of why you joined us today? Anything that we can try to answer for you?
Yeah, I think that you guys were super thorough on all of the details, and I'm really excited about this program. I think I was really interested in doing this program after I recently took the Mission Capital Implicit Bias Learning Circle. It wasn't really a class, but it was kind of a group, and you got together once a week for, I think it was 9 weeks. And we had these really fruitful conversations. We looked at articles and videos, and then kind of just all broke it down and talked about it for like 2 hours. And I think that kind of experience is just so valuable. So I'm really glad to hear that there'll be office hours where we can talk with our peers and the instructors. That's going to be super helpful, I think. And like, I forgot, I think it was either you or Dr. Ashley who said that it's just, you learn so much, and it's hard to have somebody else, hard to teach other people this. They kind of really have to experience these hard conversations for themselves. So whatever we can do to inspire those conversations, to promote growth in that area, I think is going to be really important. So I'm really excited for this opportunity.
Great to hear. Thank you. And I'm guessing you're over in the Austin area since you mentioned Mission?
No, yeah, I heard about it, I think from Texas CASA, but I'm here in Bryan. So Voices for Children.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Got it. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Others, Jennifer? Anything we can answer for you?
I think y'all have done a really great job. I'm just happy to be here. I'm actually, I work under Dorothy here at Twin City Mission. So pretty much everything she said, I would echo. And I'm also a current EMPSA student. So I've gotten the pleasure of seeing Dr. Ashley a few different times and stuff. And so I'm just really excited because I know that this will be a really high quality program. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Any others? Evan?
No, I don't really have any questions. You guys have explained it fairly thoroughly. Being part of the webinar has really helped give a sense of the direction of the program and the content. So thank you for providing all of those details.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you for joining us for our webinars. We've used our webinars in that exact way that you mentioned to help move us along in this direction. So you've probably got a sense of some of the content that we're thinking about. So we appreciate it. Any others, burning questions? We'd certainly love to know how you heard about us. Any specifics of what you're thinking about would all be helpful.
Hi, good afternoon, Professor Taylor.
How are you?
Good. We actually met in 2019. I don't know if you remember me, at a June training for nonprofit leadership in College Station. And that was my first introduction to a lot of these initiatives at the George Bush School. And I was very impressed, and I was very moved with all the efforts and the initiatives at the school. I'm in government. I'm a little bit farther away in the DC area, but I really made an effort to stay engaged with the school because I really can connect and relate to a lot of the, I think, objectives and goals of the school. So thank you for all of that. And I guess one question that I have is, being somewhat removed from the area, how flexible would the program be for, let's say, those that are, let's say, not a drive away from the school? I see that there's like a weekly live sessions and whatnot. So how flexible would it be in that respect? Would there also be flexibility in Maybe another opportunity down the road if the fall, for example, is not a good time, and just things like that in general.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
good.
can,
Please, Jasmine, you go right ahead.
sure,
Good
I
to
can
see
jump
you.
in. Thank you for your question, JT. And that's a great question, and I apologize for not making it clearer earlier, but this is a 100% online program. Those office hours take place on Zoom. So they are, we want this to be accessible for anyone coming from any location. So we, hope that that wouldn't be a barrier for you being in DC other than just the time change. And maybe taking on a late Monday evening session with our cohort. But it is all online. And as I mentioned earlier, the weekly structure of the courses. So each course, for some context, is 3 weeks long. And there's 1, 2, and 3 module within that 3-week course. And each of those will open up on a Wednesday morning and they close the following Tuesday evening. So you have pretty much an entire week. We make sure that you guys have the weekend in between there to get the work done as well. Just to provide ample time and opportunity for you to all really see the material. If you need to walk away from it and think through it a little bit throughout the week, we want that to be there. And the Monday evening sessions are kind of on the tail end of each of those modules to provide people with time to reflect before they come into that group setting. So that if they do have remaining questions, or in a week where in the final public policy and partnerships course where you're building an advocacy plan, you have time to put that plan together before you present it and talk through the details with your peers. So I don't imagine that location should be a barrier. Everything's online, and we're very flexible and willing to work with you all individually if things come up. And I'm always a resource, and Dr. Taylor is also always a resource. So thank you for that question. That was great time to clarify on my end.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think since someone else alluded to it, with the courses opening on a Wednesday, it gives you really that full week on your own in preparation for our Monday evenings, which is the reason why we specifically host those live office hours, is because that Monday, those conversations have been so fruitful in our other continuing education programs to reflect on what you accomplished during the week, questions that have come up, and to add clarity to whatever the assignments and also discussion questions were for the week. So we utilize those Mondays to kind of summarize what everyone experienced. So let's say, for example, the opening week, you get to that point where you've had a conversation with someone else in your organization about what you were working on, what your discussion questions were, and the assignments that you had, because we need to learn with you. And that information is super helpful as to what's happening on the ground. How are folks responding when you present this information, let's say back at your organization, or organization leaders and peers, those that you consider colleagues? Because again, we want, it's helpful for us playing in the practitioner space to have that perspective from you. And what we've seen is that peers in your cohorts inside of the modules, the dialogue and conversation from a bunch of professionals that are out there working in the space, while we sit on the academic side at this point, even though, again, we've all been out there as practitioners, is super helpful both ways. So those live sessions on Mondays, I think has been just one of those things that's worked real well for us, and we're happy to host. I know we're close on time, but I'm certainly willing to answer any other questions that folks may have or comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Hi,
we can stay on as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
no, you're fine. Hi, everybody. First, I want to thank you so much for creating the certificate and having the informational. So I have a question. I think I have a situation that's a little different from most people that are here. So I am actually an undergraduate student at Texas A&M University, and I wanted to know if, as an undergraduate student, I would still be able to take this certificate.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we want to be upfront that we're certainly looking for a certain type, and that type is someone who's preparing in the direction of advocating in this space. And so I'm not sure what you're thinking about doing professionally, but we will certainly challenge you in the program that if this is on your mind, to learn as much as you can and follow up with you along the way to see how you're thinking about applying the stuff that you're learning. So the short answer is absolutely. The longer answer is what we know that we have to set up. This program is going to be so unique on some level that we're trying to set up scenarios depending on where folks are. So just like in our other certificate program, we know that we have some folks that aren't working in the industry, but are targeting the industry for employment, or they volunteer somewhere where they know that a generalist background in nonprofit leadership would be helpful for them personally. So whether you be an executive director or CEO, the way that I tend to think about it is everybody reports to someone. And if you have this information, if you're willing to establish this type of dialogue to move the nonprofit sector forward in relation to racial equity within, we'd be happy to have you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to be cognizant of everyone's time and just provide some next steps as we wrap up today. And then I think both Dr. Taylor and myself can stay on if people have remaining questions, but I know this is a busy time of the week. So before we let you all go, I just want to bring attention to the link on this slide. It is the webpage where all of the courses and the certificate programs are listed. You can go read more about the programs and each of the individual courses, register on those pages as well. And then my email is on here as well, just for reference. I'm happy to schedule a call with anyone that wants to talk through any of this a bit more or exchange a note. But just want to thank you all again so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. And as a reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up through the LiveWell system that you registered in, and it will include the link to our webpage and the recording of this session, as well as the link to the registration page. And just once again, thank you all very much. And we do hope to see you in the fall.